Welcome to Lawyer Up with HMC, where we unravel the complexities of legal battles, share insights into high-stakes litigation, and provide strategies for navigating the legal landscape. Join us as we delve into and discuss common legal issues and interview industry professionals and experts in the field. Whether you're a legal professional, a business owner, or simply curious about the world of litigation, our podcast offers valuable knowledge and practical advice to empower you in your legal journey. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hmclawyers.com. Now here's the host of the Lawyer Up with HMC podcast, Kristen Hagg.
Hey, welcome everyone. This is the first ever episode of Lawyer Up with HMC, the show where we, HMC lawyers and our guests, dive into topics commonly encountered in the world of civil and commercial litigation. As noted, I am your host, Kristen Hagg. I'm a lawyer at HMC and a podcast enthusiast. With me is today's co-host, Praveen Thind, another lawyer at HMC. Good morning, Praveen.
Good morning. I'm very excited for our first ever episode of Lawyer Up with HMC.
Yeah, we're excited. We're nervous. And Praveen, why don't you tell our listeners what we will be discussing today?
Sure. Today we're talking about forensic accounting and litigation. While it might not seem like the most exhilarating topic for most people, those of us involved in litigation understand the importance of having an expert in forensic accounting and how they can help us accurately and effectively evaluate losses.
Yeah, you know what? It's tantalizing stuff if you ask me. But okay, well, without further ado, let us introduce our expert guest for today, Martin Valvano. Martin is a senior manager and forensic accountant at BDO Canada. We at HMC have had the great pleasure of working with Martin on various litigation files over the years, and we are incredibly lucky to have him with us today to share his insights on the show. Welcome, Martin. It's fantastic to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. It's also fantastic to be here. I'm always very excited about forensic accounting. I don't know why.
Sorry, we shouldn't have taken a dig so quickly. That wasn't fair. I mean, there's so many things that lawyers can be made fun of for, right? So
that's very true. We can stay away from those.
We actually all get along really well, forensic accountants and lawyers. So it's all good. No more making fun of forensic accounting. But yeah, our guests may not know this, but BDO and HMC are in the same building. And the funny thing is we rarely see you, Martin. Why is that?
Yeah, I don't know if that's still a COVID hangover where we never seem to be in the office on the same day. I think that probably is the reason why.
I don't know. It sounds like you're avoiding us.
Yeah, maybe you don't like lawyers.
No, I would never avoid you guys.
No, we totally respect the work from home model. And frankly, I'd love to be wearing my pajama pants right now. So, and fewer BDO employees means faster trips for us up and down the elevator. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we dive in, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself personally, professionally, how you got into forensic accounting?
Yeah, certainly. I guess maybe I'll start at how I got into forensic accounting. So I had a bit of I would say my post-secondary career was a little bit interesting. It was first I was doing an undergrad in science, chemistry, and biochemistry. Turned out it wasn't really for me. And what I did is I then went over into business. I really started to like accounting. It could be my science-minded brain or that way of thinking. And after I graduated, I was really lucky and I was able to start my career at a boutique forensic accounting firm. Was able to get right into it and start working on, really interesting cases right off the bat. And I've been doing forensic accounting for just over 15 years now. And it's been a great ride. No 2 days are the same, which that's one of the things that to me is very exciting about forensic accounting is it's an ever-changing world and no two cases are the same. So yeah, it's been quite enjoyable. And then personally, I started my career in Toronto and Ontario, and then when the floods happened in Calgary in 2013, I came out and assisted because there were just a lot of insurance claims to work through, and I really loved Calgary, and I moved out, and haven't looked back. So it was great. Met my wife the first week of moving here, and here we are.
It was all meant to be.
Yeah, it was all meant to be.
Yeah, well, we all know. I mean, Alberta is, it's pretty awesome. We've got a bit of a bad rap lately, but it's nice to hear somebody coming from Ontario and enjoying it. Really.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely in Alberta now, so I quite enjoyed out here, and I'm not sure if I see myself moving back to Ontario at this point.
Well, we're very happy to have you, and I don't know. I've done this on purpose. People that are, actually watching the video wouldn't see my Oilers mug keep coming up. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that they won a big overtime game last night. So I just had to at least get that plug in. I'm in a really good mood today. So sorry, I won't bring up the Leafs or the Flames right now.
Some of us are Flames fans, so we don't lose any listeners here.
Yeah, I'm a huge soccer fan, and I'm a big fan of Argentina, so I've got my swag over here as well.
Nice.
It's true. There are other sports than hockey.
Yeah. And the good thing is about Argentina winning the World Cup, I get 4 years to brag about it versus just 1 year when it comes to Stanley Cup or any other progression like that. So
I should really think about a sport change. Canada's got to keep moving their way up there on the old world ranking scale. Anyways, well, the women are up there. I should.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, okay. For those of us that might be, well, not us, but our listeners that might be a bit greener with this topic, what is forensic accounting, and how can a forensic accountant assist in a litigation process?
Yeah, certainly. So forensic accounting, it's definitely not like that show CSI Miami. Blazers, but they don't give us those awesome sunglasses. No, but really, forensic accounting, our role is really to investigate the facts of a case and understand those facts and use those facts in order to quantify potential financial losses, which is usually what brings a matter around a litigation proceeding, is that there is going to be a dispute around a financial loss. And our job is to really investigate the facts and the documents and present our findings to the courts. And again, how can we assist in a litigation proceeding is just that. We provide an independent and objective opinion of what financial losses may be. And that's how we assist in a litigation proceeding and hopefully reach into a settlement.
So you've been doing this for many years now. What types of financial losses have you been involved in? Yeah,
so here at BDO, we work, there's a large diversity of types of financial losses or types of investigations that we've been involved with. We've been involved where there's been civil disputes, insurance losses. We've also been involved in criminal investigations. So it's really been a great firm just because of that diversity of work to work at. And a lot of the stuff that I get involved with a lot of insurance claim losses. That can also become prior to litigation or when it does proceed to litigation, be involved in that. And there we're quantifying the business interruption side of things usually. And other disputes I get involved with is also on the construction side. So if could be related to a construction dispute, it could have an insurance setting, but generally if there's been a delay to a project and there's usually financial impact to that, those are things that we can get involved with.
Is there any type of loss you prefer to handle over the others?
I would just say from an enjoyment perspective, I really enjoy the insurance loss and the construction work. To me, they are challenging at best, and they're also, as I talked about before, they're also very different. I've worked on the losses at the same time for the same business, but two different business operators, and both were just completely different. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about that.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about sometimes you'll be involved well before the litigation even starts. And I know, as somebody that does insurance coverage type work, one of those scenarios might be in the insurance setting where one of your clients is having a dispute with their insurer. And so, as you said, like sometimes you're retained by clients, sometimes you're retained by lawyers. Do you have a balance in your practice, or is it more one than the other?
We have a balance in our practice. I think a lot of times it really depends on how a dispute would arise and then how that dispute develops over time. More often than not, in the insurance setting, we generally do get involved early. We generally will get involved earlier on in that because it's quite more obvious that you may need an accountant because you have a business that there has been an interruption, and there for a certain period of time their revenues, expenses are going to be impacted. That's generally where that was something we may see more often than not, but a lot of times those may progress, and those may progress and get to the point where there is litigation. And we've also been approached on that front as well, where it's already gotten to that point, and then a forensic accountant is considered in order to assist in that.
And what would be, what would you advise your clients? In terms of the benefit of getting you involved early, rather than waiting until they get down the litigation path, and then have their lawyer go back and hire a forensic accountant.
Yeah, certainly. So if we get involved early, then right at the onset, we're able to look to really understand what potential financial losses can look like. We can also, using our business experiences, also be able to advise the client, how the process may work, what the timelines may be like, and start setting the expectations. And then as an engagement will progress as well, as we would often, indicate, if you do have counsel, there are things that you may want to, there might be things that you may want to review with them. Generally, those are things that would be outside of our expertise, whether if it's not an accounting issue. A perfect example would be in what I do in the insurance world. If something is subject to a policy interpretation and there is a difference of opinion of what that interpretation may be, that's something that would be outside of our role, and something where, this is where you may want to consider discussing these interpretations with legal counsel.
Okay. Yeah, I guess sometimes you're the one being asked by a lawyer to do something, but there's also times when, for example, you'd come to us or somebody else seeking our thoughts and insights on the work that you've been providing and what the policy might be saying.
Yeah, exactly. And those are situations where, again, if it's outside of our expertise, which is reviewing the accounting records and other documentation and calculating financial losses from an accounting perspective, when it's outside of our expertise, then we would definitely have our client, advise our client to seek other representation or seek other professionals to help them with other matters.
So go ahead, Praveen.
It can be a little bit of a collaborative effort then between counsel and the accountant once that's actually established. So what's that relationship like? What is it like once counsel gets involved, if they need to, and you're working together with them? Yeah,
so what that relationship is like is, again, it's just constant communication. And I know I said this quite a few times, but again, our role is to be as an independent expert and need to maintain our objectivity. But a lot of that would come through discussions with counsel as well in order to be able to maintain that. But we would often be having constant communications as our investigation or as our analysis starts to progress. That way, there's an understanding of what certain implications there may be that may determine some of the financial impact of a dispute.
All right. So let's say in the scenario where you've been working with a client and you refer them to a lawyer. Now you're in a scenario where, a lawyer comes to you and they want to hire you to do some work on an ongoing file. What's your process?
So generally our process is a lawyer would provide us with an instruction letter clearly defining what our role would be. That would be our initial process. Then we would have discussions with our lawyer about meeting just about being able to meet that defined role. And then from there, if as it does proceed, at that point, we then get involved right away and start to evaluate what potential financial losses would be surrounding the matter at hand.
And in terms of the instructions, I guess, and I know it would probably vary depending on the type of loss you're dealing with, but what types of things do you need lawyers to outline for you and provide to you for you to understand what your objective is?
Yeah, well, it is typically that is one is, I think it depends a lot is on where the stage of a certain litigation matter may be at. If a lawyer is looking, well, we're here at mitigation, or we need to file a statement of claim, maybe we need some initial estimates. So those are things that just need to be clearly defined, whether some initial estimates would be required, or whether we're looking for a where we're looking for an actual expert report, a written report that's going to be submitted. It's submitted to the courts as a litigation matter proceeds. So a lot of it depends on the stage of the litigation. I think maybe what is the outcome. If there is something very contentious that may go to trial, then we may need to have more defined roles, because there is going to be the preparation of an expert written report, a potential critique of an opposing expert. So if all of those are defined in that instruction letter, then it just allows us to set the expectations early on, and just proceed through that engagement with a lot more of efficiencies.
How do you navigate having different perspectives? Because a lawyer would approach you with a goal in mind, and you have a different perspective, a different background. So how do you navigate that difference?
Yeah, so and that can happen, but often, again, being independent and objective is our role is to evaluate the evidence and provide an independent opinion. So we would always need to maintain that. Now, there could be different perspectives or different maybe interpretations, and at some point it may be possible you would present some scenarios, or have some discussions of what that may look like. But again, just going back to our role is it really we need to be able to produce a claim, and that is the most supportable claim that we can produce, and really understand the operations of a particular business, and also understand the facts of the case involved, and also be able to really understand the evidence that can be provided.
Okay. And yeah, you kind of touched on this already, but often we do use forensic accounting reports in litigation in order to facilitate a resolution. But we all know in a litigated dispute that things can ultimately end up going to trial, even in today's settings where we aren't going to trial all that often. But what sorts of things are you considering during your analysis to ensure that you and your report are trial ready?
Yeah, certainly. So at the onset, when we are working to prepare a report, we are already thinking about trial, and we are already thinking about a report that's going to be able to stand up to an opposing expert reviewing a report that is, and a claim that is fully supported. So the reports that we prepare, there's also professional standards that we need to meet, but we look to document that report as best as possible, and we make sure that every statement is supported by evidence. And that's how we were thinking. We don't want to ever get into a situation where we've presented something that there is not sufficient support for, and then that might not go very well for you if you are in trial and during cross-examination. So we want to make sure that our reports are standing up to any sort of critique, and that's generally how when we get closer and closer to trial is again just making sure we've fully documented all of our assumptions, all of our analysis, all of our methodology, make sure everything is clearly explained all within that report. That way we could be more efficient, and it's much easier during cross-examination if all the questions you can point the opposing counsel to, here, this is this is the explanation of the report. This is where we explain it. This is the document this is the source document that we relied on. So that's how we do to get our reports trial ready right from the onset.
Yeah, and obviously that helps with you being able to present a report in trial and stand up to cross-examination and all these types of things. But I suppose that would also really help in terms of explaining your findings to whoever you ultimately have to explain it to, whether it's, a judge or a jury or what have you, is having all those supportable facts so it makes sense to them. So what would you say are some of the more challenging aspects of just communicating the complex financial information to non-expert people?
Well, that comes in the art of the report writing. Is we need to make sure that our audience is not going to be an accountant. So we need to make sure in our report writing that we're able to fully explain our processes and methodology. Maybe we try to stay away from some accounting industry terms and just try to explain it in a business sense, where it is easier to understand, especially if you have a very complex, sometimes you can have a very complex issue or a very complex analysis. And we do take great care to explain that as part of the written report as best as possible and clearly lay it out, but not for the audience of an accountant.
Okay. Yeah, you have to dumb it down a little bit for us, especially a lot of lawyers didn't go into math background for a reason. So
excuse me.
I was into math too. I know where you're going.
I know we were talking about that actually earlier. Was you mentioned right off the top, Martin, that you have an undergraduate degree in science, and actually I do too. Although some people, I took kinesiology. People tell me that I took gym, but it does help actually to have sort of the differing backgrounds, I guess, than one might expect for somebody that's in your field, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have colleagues who we have very diverse backgrounds, and people have very different. They went through just a different route to get to where we are, and that kind of that collection of background, I think it's a big strength for us. And like me personally, having a science degree, I think it's just made that kind of like-minded, where if there is any hypothesis, it needs to be tested, and it needs to be tested, and you need to do experiments, and you need to make sure that your experiments are also holding up. And something that's interesting in science is that if another scientist grabs your experiment, they should be able to replicate it and get the same results. So I almost see that sometimes when preparing an expert report, is that if there is going to be an opposing accountant, they should be able to replicate my analysis and get the same results. There shouldn't be any sort of gray area, or if they shouldn't be getting a different conclusion if they're replicating my analysis.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I mean, that's the thing. At the end of the day, math it should be objective, and I imagine you do come across reports, like when you've been hired in the rebuttal setting, where you're just looking at it and their analysis is just completely nonsensical. I mean, whether they've been hired as a hired gun or whatever else, how do you deal with that in your rebuttal?
So what we deal with in a rebuttal is the documentation of evidence or statements that are being made in a report. The other one is there are often times where there may not be specific documentation, and an assumption is made. So one of the things is we would want to look at, and we also vet this to a high degree in our reports, where an assumption is going to be made that it's a reasonable assumption, it's fully documented, it's fully explained. There are often sometimes where you do have an opposing expert report, there could be an assumption made without any explanation or any sort of analysis to really document, does that assumption make sense? So at the same time, we also use our business expertise in order to evaluate assumptions that are being made by an opposing expert.
Right. Yeah, and we always say a report is only as strong or effective as the assumptions upon which it is based. And so, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and if I can just touch on that, the same goes for us. If we were to, from from counsel receive an assumption, typically an assumption would be outside of our expertise. Again, would it be an interpretation of a policy or a legal interpretation? But we still would evaluate that assumption, and we would still work with counsel to make sure that does make sense. And again, it's to maintain to be independent and objective. So a lot of times where you do need to rely on assumption, we need to make sure that assumption is making sense, and we document it as best that we can. Going back to being trial ready, those are things that on cross-examination that can really come back. If you haven't fully documented your assumptions.
Right.
Do you ever come across where you're actually finding errors in the numbers from another report? Is that something that you also have to review and make sure that holds water?
Yeah, we have. There is a very stringent review process to make sure that there are no errors or formula errors in a report, and also that all of the source documentation that you're relying on is all accurately reflected in your report as well. It is. I have to say, it's incredibly rare to see an actual error like that when reviewing an opposing expert report. Opposing accountants, they usually have very stringent processes as well in order to go through, just to make sure, because we can't have errors like that.
Well, they should probably have a calculator, kind of like the one I have on my desk.
Yeah.
I use this daily. It's very, very helpful. Very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I remember the first time I had to present a really big investigation or a really big loss on screen. The first time that I had to present that, and what the opposing expert did was pull out a calculator just like that.
Oh.
In the back of my mind, like, this better work out. and it did, of course. But yeah, it's a powerful tool. So.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, there must be, like, have there been obviously changes over the years in terms of the tools that are available for you to do these things? Like, how much is, I'm not going to necessarily say artificial intelligence or anything like that, but how has technology evolved to help you with what you do?
Yeah, so technology and even at this firm, which is really exciting, has really embraced technology, and how can we use AI, and how can we use evolving technology just to provide better solutions and more efficiencies for our clients. In terms of forensic accounting, we may use it in order for some content creation, or we also will, if we have a lot of data sets, then we really want to use technology as best we can in order to extract data and really understand what it is that we want to analyze and how that would impact our analysis. But in terms of, I think that at this point, for forensic accounting, you still definitely need people involved to make decisions, and also review those matters. So we would never, I would say, fully rely on that. We would use it as a tool in order just to help maybe gain some efficiencies as part of our analysis process. And sometimes if we do have to do some research, I find that AI is nice to kind of just push you in the right direction. And then after that, just close ChatGPT and get right to the sources in order to do your research. Because I've heard of cases where people have not done that, and it's also come back pretty hard. So it's a technology that we want to work with, but not rely on.
Yeah, I think we've been kind of running into the same thing in the legal world. Like, I can't say, I mean, we don't really use that much in our office, but yeah, people are using it as a tool. And anybody that has been over-reliant on it has gotten themselves into a little bit of trouble with AI making up cases and things like that. Yeah, judges don't really like non-existent cases. So yeah, no, we're kind of in the same boat for sure.
I think certain provinces are now requiring that you actually indicate that you've relied on it in any of your materials. Yeah. So some provinces have started that, and I think most are going to follow suit. So everyone will sort of really be careful when they're looking at those factums and briefs. And
yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great tool for us, and I think it's not something we want to say, well, it doesn't apply. I think it's a great tool for us, and leave it at that. As it's a tool for us to be better and be more efficient.
Right? Like, I don't want it to get too much better, because maybe it'll be really, really good for a very short period of time, and then it's going to be like Westworld, right? We're all gonna be taken over by artificial intelligence. I'm old enough to have those irrational fears.
Yeah, just like Skynet with Terminator.
Yes, the Terminator, exactly.
Especially when you have Google investing in all these robotic firms, it really feels like sometimes you're in a science fiction movie.
No, the 90s predicted everything perfectly. Praveen wouldn't know that, but
hey, I was around.
Except for fashion. There's some questionable 90s fashion.
It's hasn't come back now. It's coming back.
It's all, yeah, I thought the 80s fashion would never come back, but here we are, high-waisted jeans, all this stuff. I mean, I don't wear them because I look ridiculous, but I can appreciate that, they've made a reasonable comeback. Anyways, we digress. We were talking about being able to, support the assumptions and things like that. So what would you say to clients or even to lawyers as well about the types of business records that are necessary and should be kept in order to provide a forensic accountant with what they need when they get involved?
Oh, yeah, certainly. Well, really, this is something that we provide all of our clients, not necessarily when we are working on a dispute with them, but you just want to have very good on the record keeping front. You just want to be able to keep very good and accurate records. The client really is going to want to have a good process of just how to record their ongoing business transactions and day to day. And then you want records that are very easily accessible as well. If I were to talk about in general, what are things that we would usually start with is, again, a bit of a no-brainer, which would be we look at obviously our annual financial statements, whether they're audited or reviewed. Monthly financial records also become very important. Payroll records and other payroll records, general ledger, customer records, you name it. A lot of times corporate records, so contracts, purchase orders, invoices, anything related to the procurement and selling processes. So there's a wide variety. They are very, they can be very business focused and also very business focused, and each business may have different types of records. That's one of the things we want to understand, and what type of records would be available. But if you do have good record keeping, that's really how you can help your forensic accountant out. So
you don't want a box of crinkled up receipts, is what you're saying?
Well, if that's all they have and it's what we have for support, ideally we don't want that, but it can happen. It can happen. Especially, I remember there was previous ones where I did actually receive documents in a shoebox. The office.
No, well, yeah. I mean, I'm speaking from experience. You're asking your client, you're like, yeah, we're going to need this and this and this, and then once you see what they've got, you're like, oh no, what have I got myself into? So yeah, it makes our jobs a lot easier, but it's tough. I mean, it's the same way that people aren't expecting to get into car accidents, or they aren't expecting after a car accident to end up in litigation. You're just not really thinking about these things, but it's very important whether it's a small business or a big business, right?
Absolutely. It is and it is generally just a good business practice to maintain really good records. Another thing that I would touch on is if there is going to be, if there is a dispute, or even if we go back where there's an insurance loss, we have a fire, or we have a flood, there may be a whole host of other costs that are unexpected that a business may have to incur, and just documenting those costs and making sure that we're keeping that separate from what are regular ongoing operations. That's something that can really be helpful. We would generally advise clients when we're in that insurance setting is if you even have an account and a general ledger that you can set up, and in that account track everything that you may think would be related, and that gives us really good starting point for us to start reviewing and analyzing and really determining, okay, are these extra expense, are these regular ongoing expense? But if all of that is captured, it just helps us on that end as well.
Yeah, and being over-inclusive as opposed to under-inclusive is probably a good idea. Yeah, because people are thinking, oh, I didn't think that would be relevant. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And again, it goes back to when we do start is setting those expectations of what it is that our role and our mandate, and again, if there is support and evidence that it should be made part of a claim, we want to make sure that that's being put forward. We're always trying. Our goal is to put together the most supportable claim that we can, and I think that's the value that we do provide our clients, is that it is the most supportable claim. It doesn't usually make sense to put a claim together that is lacking in some support. that could be really inefficient when it comes down to a settlement process, or especially when it comes down to litigation. So we would just want to make sure the more we can support, the better.
I expect technology could be something that helps with record keeping too, because we're speaking about water loss or fire loss, and if you just have a shoebox of receipts, that could go missing and is nowhere to be found.
Up in flames.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of insurance policies, and just going back on my experience with insurance, they will actually have coverage for accounts receivable. And that's where if you did have that old school paper accounts receivable and you lost it in a fire, you could recover some costs in order to replicate or recreate that physical book. I haven't seen that too often these days, but
that's true. I mean, I always see that in policies, but I've never actually had to deal with it. But yeah, I mean, that's happened. I've had flood losses or fire losses where, I mean, we're representing an insurance company in these scenarios. But yeah, mom and pop shop is like, well, everything went up. I don't have those records anymore. They disappeared in the loss. And so, I mean, is there anything you can do in that scenario to really help piece things together?
Well, if you don't have anything specific to the business, or if they have, we need to take what is available and look to what we can piece together, what is available. And then we'd have to look at some outside sources, look at if there's any sort of industry statistics, any sort of benchmarking that we can use. And again, if there is support that's not available, we don't want to just say, well, this is what a loss could be. We still want to be able to make sure that we've done our work, we've done our analysis, and what we're putting together is very reasonable. Sometimes we may need to rely on some industry benchmarks or industry statistics in order to support that.
And you've mentioned the floods being here. You mentioned COVID. Are there any particularly memorable or challenging cases you've worked on? And I mean, obviously, without divulging too many details about the case, but just in general, what types of losses?
Yeah, certainly. During COVID, that was, again, interesting times. I'm sure a lot of us still may have some PTSD lingering from that. But that gave a rise to, especially in the insurance world, and also in other disputes outside of insurance, but that gave rise to a lot of interesting coverage and even legal issues surrounding that. It was very unprecedented at the time. And a lot of these potential interpretations would really impact what financial losses may be, or maybe I would say recovery of financial losses, because a lot of businesses really felt being shut down and nobody allowed to go anywhere. A lot of businesses, they were really impacted and suffered some significant losses during that time. But when it came down to the recovery side, then there was a lot of interesting coverage issues. And even going back to COVID, you also had different restrictions under different regions and trying to pull all of that together. And then you also had, just from an analysis perspective, if you are looking at one individual particular business, we've just overnight, we are now in just such a completely different world. So again, it's what does the historical say, but what does our new kind of reality also look like? So there's a lot of interesting. I thought it was definitely some difficult times, but from a professional standpoint, a lot of interesting discussions, a lot of interesting analysis, a lot of interesting work that went through that.
Yeah, no, the need for services actually went up. Our types of services went up quite a bit during those times. So,
yeah, and same for us, where so much of it was unprecedented. So we didn't know until there was finally a case on it. So we would just say, could go this way, could go that way. We'll see.
And it could have been exactly, or hopefully a case makes its way through the courts and there's a decision as well at some point. It's
interesting. The odd policy or insurance policy we saw was ahead of the game and had provisions for that type of stuff, but it just was so unprecedented that so many people got left in the lurch because they didn't know to prepare for it. I'm sure it's a much more standard part of insurance policies now, but anyways, I mean, we could go on and on. I mean, look at, here we are on screen. We wouldn't be as good at this as we are, not to say we're really good at it or anything like that, but we're going to be so comfortable talking this way. Even though we're all in the same building right now,
That's
we're doing this.
elevator ride, really. But
Oh no, we'll meet you on the elevator later. That's the plan.
He'll avoid us. We know how it goes.
All right. Yeah, he's gonna duck out of here as soon as he can.
just head down and off we go.
I got to avoid Praveen and Kristen.
Praveen, as they say.
Praveen, yeah, we are
Praveen.
one person.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's your favorite part? What's your favorite part of litigation files?
Oh, the challenge for sure. I think just the challenge and the kind of the ever-changing, almost the ever-changing landscape. I say this all the time, like no two disputes are the same, even if we're looking at the same business in the same industry. There's just very different facts, and there are very different circumstances that may be leading to financial losses. So the challenge of that is something I really enjoy. The other thing I really enjoy is I really love business owners telling me about their business. I love hearing about it, and it's to me it's just very interesting, and I love to really just to gain that full and in-depth understanding of how their business operates, what makes that business tick, and then again tying that to if there has been an incident, tying that to how that business operates and relative to that incident has impacted them in a certain way and what a financial recovery may look like. So that's one of the things I really enjoy that about my job. At the end of the day, we can talk about AI, but it is a people industry.
Right.
One of my heroes is Michael Scott, and he says when I want to hear about people, I fully believe that as well. So,
oh man, yeah, I kept a paper business going. I mean, that would just be people that watch, like people that won't, watch The Office now would just make no sense whatsoever.
No, that's a show that I think my wife and I, we really like watching that show, and then we get to the end and we're like, what do you want to watch? Let's start it over. Why not?
From the beginning.
And we always find new things, and there's really new. We always find new things and new theories or new details that we didn't notice before, and they did a lot of foreshadowing. But anyways, it's a different type of podcast to talk about all of that, I think.
I know. I was going to say I would love to rewatch The Office, but it's just so awkward. I love it, but it's awkward. Anyways, but now that you mentioned working with business owners, we were talking about, I mean, even when you get retained by a lawyer, I mean, you are going to have to establish a relationship with the common client, right?
Yes. Yeah, we do have to establish a relationship with a common client. We do need to get a full understanding of how their business operates and then a full understanding of how the matter at hand has impacted them. We still need to do this in a way that we are objective and independent as we form our opinion. But it also allows us at the very onset, again, to set those expectations at the very onset. Sometimes, and I think as lawyers, you would also know this, is that in a dispute, there's a lot of emotions involved. This is a client's business. This is their lifeblood. This is their passion. And they're very passionate about it. So there are a lot of emotions involved. So it is also important for us to step back, set some expectations, some guidelines. This is how this is going to work. Again, reiterate our role as independent objective. We need to be able to support any claim that we do put together. So we do ask a lot of questions. We may ask for a lot of records. We may ask for a lot of documents, and there's a reason for that, because again, the claims or lawsuits we put together, they need to stand up to scrutiny. They need to be independent, and they need to be objective, and that's what's going to help move a settlement process forward.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think sometimes we have a tendency, we deal with, the file, the paper so often that we do tend to kind of lose sight of either the individual or the business that's involved in something. So I think that's a very good, parting thought for us to have. Unfortunately, we are kind of running out of time here for today, so we'll probably wrap things up. But now that we've spent this time together and we're like best friends now, I'm hoping we'll see each other around here a little bit more. And in fact, maybe today we should purposely run into one another in the elevator.
Yeah, maybe I'll just I'll sit in front of the lobby and not hide my head this time.
Yeah, that would be great. Any parting thoughts, Praveen?
No, I just want to say a huge thanks for coming today and being our first ever guest. You had a really great conversation and learned a lot. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's been great to be here, and I'm very honored to be part of this inaugural podcast show, and I'm very honored that be a part of it. So I hope it's very successful. I think it will be.
Well, thank you as always for making us look good, and importantly, thank you to our hopefully new listeners for tuning in. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You've been tuning into the Lawyer Up with HMC podcast with your host, Kristen Hagg. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hmclawyers.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.